There's just so much more to hear.
Download our podcasts at DubaiI1038.com.
We are looking in more detail this morning at our top story, and that is that surprise Fed rate cut, or I would call it a semi-surprise Fed rate cut. We did get a bit of a heads up from Jay Powell, the Fed chairman, over the weekend, an unusual statement saying that they were prepared to take measures. Most people were expecting 25 basis points. Goldman Sachs came out and said, you know what, could be double that, and they were right.
They were. I mean, you mentioned this yesterday. It was a surprise to me, but I did think as soon as this happened yesterday morning on the business breakfast, Brandy was quoting that research from Goldman saying, A, they expect an emergency rate cut soon, and B, they expect it to be 0.5%. Not the first time Goldman Sachs has got
Brandy
an interest rate
has been
call.
right.
Thank you very much for that. But that's what came to pass. So we've had a 0.5-point rate cut. The UAE Central Bank immediately following suit.
We are looking this morning at what it means for the UAE economy. We're going to be looking at what it means for the property market.
And what it means for Richard Dean, which is the most important thing. I've been crunching the numbers, a 0.5-point rate cut. What does it mean for someone like me who has a floating rate mortgage? It means for my mortgage about 15,000 dirhams a year better off.
Nice, you're buying breakfast this morning in that case.
Which is not trivial when you think about it. I mean, it's not going to move GDP for the UAE, but if you extrapolate that, of course, mortgage holders against people who, particularly in the corporate sector, people who've got floating rate corporate loans, the cumulative effect is what we're going to be looking at.
Well, you say it doesn't move economies, but if you look at what the Hong Kong government and others are doing to put more money in people's pockets, to get them to spend, to bolster the retail economy, the consumer economy, that's doing almost exactly the same thing, is it not?
Well, it is, and it's funny, I was reading a really good analysis that Bloomberg here in the UAE, on what it means for the Gulf economies, and their economists made the point, monetary policy is all well and good, cutting interest rates, but actually in the Gulf, the big mover is fiscal policy, government spending, so that's the big one that they're looking out for.
We are going to speak to mortgage experts a little bit later in the morning as well to ask what lower interest rates could mean for the real estate industry. Fortunately, we have a real estate expert in the studio with us now. He's actually here to discuss something completely different, a What Workers Want report that his company has put together, looking at how job seekers view real estate. But he's in the studio, therefore he's our captive, therefore he is now our spokesperson on the impact of lower interest rates in this emergency cut on the real estate industry. Stuart Healey, the Commercial Director for Building Projects at Savills. Good morning.
Good morning, Brandy.
So, emergency rate cut and real estate, what's your take?
So I think any time the rate is cut by any government, we've seen Australia do it recently, the American government are constantly pressing for similar measures, and every time that the rate is cut, it is to encourage investment. And Richard said it himself, that there has a modest impact on a person's own mortgage, but if a person has a portfolio, if they are looking to invest in the UAE market when rates are being cut, then it's certainly an apropos time to be considering it.
Does it make people, I mean, how low do rates get, or how much of a cut do we have to see before people who wouldn't necessarily be in the market come into the market?
It's a difficult question. I think in Europe we're seeing examples where there are even negative interest rates, but I don't see that coming to the UAE quite soon. But I think any time that there is a reduction, I think it certainly inspires and potentially encourages investors, new investors, perhaps existing investors to perhaps increase their portfolio, or people new to the market to look at the space.
Well, speaking of looking at space, that's exactly what we're doing with you this morning. This new report that you have put out, what workers want in terms of real estate. What say do workers have in real estate anyway? I mean, I work in a lovely new office. And to be fair, people did sit down and talk with Richard and I and say, what do you need in a studio? But you're looking at job seekers and how they are weighing up the environments that they might end up working in when they're taking a job.
That's right. The war on talent has been building over several years, particularly in this region. What we have to remember is that Dubai was once an economy made up of construction, oil and gas and tourism, but now it's such a diversified economy with several new sectors, established sectors like media, like finance, like technology, like healthcare. And what this really means is that this diversification has made the talent pool smaller and far more competitive. Our research is telling us that compensation is no longer a key component. Don't get me wrong; it certainly remains an important factor. But the generation Y and the generation Z of today is considering several other factors like the workspace that they live in, and they're considering things like, our research was telling us that over 70% of workers would consider a longer commute, up to 30 minutes, in exchange for going to what they consider their ideal workspace. So
what is an ideal workspace? What do workers want?
So it's no longer a concept of a one dimension. It's no longer an office space with a desk and that automatically means an output. We're having to consider so many other tangible and intangible elements to an office space. That may be ensuring that there is a place to collaborate, a space to do deep thinking, a space to take a private phone call, a space to relax and socialize, because ultimately you can't concentrate for 8 to 10 hours a day 100% of the time. The research is saying that the people need to and want to move around their office space, work in different spaces, and they over 60% say they are far more productive when they are able to migrate around the office, working in different zones.
And are employers providing this? I mean, how much are they actually taking these whims and fancies of employees into account?
So I think the technology sector has been pioneering this over the last 5 to 10 years. But we're seeing it more and more with different sectors, even some parts of the law industry even. But we're seeing it emerging and becoming more important, that companies are now asking themselves, well, what do I need to do to retain talent? What kind of environment, not only tangible but intangible environment, do I need to provide our staff in order to attract and retain them?
Speaking of providing an environment for staff, we've been talking quite a lot this week about working from home, flexible working. Twitter came out yesterday asking its employees around the world to think about whether or not at the moment they'd be better off working from home. What kind of discussions are you having with clients? What are you seeing at the moment?
So particularly in my field of expertise, what we're finding is that it's actually becoming a commercial decision as well. People are seeing the research out there that suggests that flexible working is much more attractive to all workers, but particularly the youth, the generation that's coming through now. And the commercial side of it is that if you provide these kinds of flexibilities, these kinds of advantages, which are attractive to these workers, maybe it means you're able to make your own office space more efficient. Maybe it's a more cost-effective solution when you've got people working remotely or people that don't require an office space. There was a survey done a few years ago which said over 80% of respondents did not need an office to be productive. And that, I think, speaks volumes to the trend that we're seeing in the workspace design at the moment.
Stuart Healey, Commercial Director for Buildings and Projects at Savills. Thank you very much for your time this morning.
Thank you.
There's just so much more to hear.
Download our podcasts at DubaiEye1038.com.